Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Wells. I write horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and I talk about games on the internet. Today, we're going back to what I described as the best monster manual that I had ever seen. And this is part two, the Alien Archive 2 from Starfinder. Why do I say it's the best monster manual? Because it is much more than just a collection of creatures you can fight. Every creature in it, every monster in it, uh, comes in multiple challenge ratings, or it doubles as a player race, or it adds new equipment to the game, or it can be both a monster and a spaceship. There's so much variety in here. Just the sheer scope of the book and the options presented do so much to demonstrate how much infinite possibility there is in a game like Starfinder. So let's get into let's get into this and have a look at it. Now, Starfinder, we early stuff, table of contents, and then how do you read the stat blocks, and then we get right into it. And so some of these are creatures we have already seen in the first Alien Archive. We had Aeons. This is a new kind of Aeon. And just like I was saying, what is this? There's adaptive defense module armor upgrades. This is fantastic for me. I've got one group in particular that is always asking, anytime they fight anything, they want to know what they can save. Can this thing's teeth or claws be used? Are its scales valuable? Does it have like a poison gland that we can harvest and take home and make poison out of? They want to know what they can get out of every creature they fight. And so a book like this Alien Archive 2 and the first one are just full of really great stuff like that. You fight this Aeon, and that's great, and you beat it, and you're very excited, and you get some treasure, but you also get the chance to do an armor upgrade using the technology or the biology that comes from the creature. So hooray for that. Some of the creatures, like this Akata, are interesting because they come in different uh, styles. So the Akata itself is like this evil kind of deep space dog thing, but it can bite people and turn them into zombies. And so you get not only the stats for the creature, you get stats for the zombie it can create, and you get the template graft so that it can turn anything into a zombie. One of the really wonderful things that Starfinder's Alien Archives do is they have these template grafts so that the game becomes very modular. Maybe you want this kind of void zombie, but you want it to be an orc instead of a person. Or you want it to be a dinosaur instead of a person. You want it to be anything. You can take that core creature stat block and add this void zombie template graft onto it. And so suddenly the variety of things you can create opens way up. And you can see this is pretty simple. It just adds some extra traits, it adds some extra modifiers, and you're done. So we're not going to look at everything in here. I do want to point out, though, that one of the hallmarks of the variety on display here is something like this Archon Gazelle, which is not a combatant, really. There's stats for it if you really want to fight it, but, two of its powers are docile and tranquility aura. This is not the kind of thing that is going to be, beating down your door and murdering your children. This is just a peaceful gazelle that maybe you are asked to hunt, or that somebody else has stolen. Anyway, there's a lot of good story possibilities wrapped up in here, including more equipment. Its horns have part of this magical effect of this tranquility aura idea, and so you can actually use the horns to make a magic item, or you can use its hide to make a magic item. So there's a lot of neat things that you can do in here. Excuse me. Let's look at this bear. Uplifted animals, this is something that shows up in a lot of science fiction. The idea that you have taken a recognizable animal, like a bear, and then through genetic or biological engineering, you have granted it human intelligence, human-like intelligence, opposable fingers, fully bipedal legs, whatever it is that you've done to it to uplift it. And now it is a sentient being of its own. And so this stat block has the challenge rating 4 version. There's a scarier challenge rating 7 version. And then here on the other page, racial traits. If you want to use this as a player race so that one of your player characters is an uplifted bear, well, here you go. You've got all the stats to do it. I really like a lot of this stuff. I'm just going to flip through here and show off some of my favorite animals that appear in here. One of the great things about Alien Archive 2 is that several Lovecraft Cthulhu mythos creatures show up in it. There's the Migo, which is like the mad scientist insectile alien that shows up in some of the stories. The Color Out of Space is arguably my favorite Lovecraft story because the monster in it is a color. And here that color is green, but what it describes in the story and the way it describes it here, it's not a color that exists in the world. It's not a color that anyone can see, and that people who see it go mad trying to comprehend how this new color that they have never even imagined, how could it exist? And it drives people crazy and it causes all sorts of problems. And they've actually done a really good job here in this monster manual of taking something as esoteric as a color and turning it into an actual monster that you can fight, that you can deal with. And of course, there is another template graft. Let's say that you want to fight, instead of just a normal lizard monster, you want a lizard monster with this weird color all over him, shining on him, possessing him, however it works. And now you've got it. You've got the template graft where you can slap this on there. So, hooray for that! Let's flick through here. I did want to show off the dinosaurs. I love the dinosaur entry in here because these are all very standard dinosaurs. There's a pterosaur, there's a dromaeosaurid, there's a plesiosaur. I don't know how to pronounce thyreophoran. The next page has ceratopsid, theropod, sauropod, all these recognizable dinosaur classes. But then the picture is nothing we recognize. This is clearly not an Earth dinosaur. And so what they've done here is they have just posited the theory that many different planets have, in their ancient evolutionary history, some kind of megafauna that they are going to call dinosaur. And so you can take these and then apply those template grafts onto them, whether it's origin or environment or something weird like Void Zombie, and say, well, this is a dinosaur that you might recognize as being kind of sort of like a Brachiosaurus, but obviously alien and has these very different features. Maybe it, has 17 eye stalks, or maybe it's furry, or maybe, whatever it is. So you can create your own monsters, and they give you all the tools to do that, and I love it. There's a couple more dragons, metallic dragons, and outer void dragons, which is wonderful. I'm flicking through because there's a couple things that I really want to show off because I think they're awesome. The Goran is one that intrigues me and appeals to me quite a bit because this is a plant-based race. They are sentient people, but instead of being made of meat, they are made of plant. And they have some kind of plant powers, and they have some neat things they can do. And of course, there are racial traits. If you want this to be your character's heritage or background, then you've got the Goran right there. Let's skip ahead so I can show you the golems. The first book had some golems. This one adds some new golems. There's the cybernetic golem. And my favorite is the nanotech golem. Such a wonderful science fiction idea, and they have brought it in. Here's this, beautiful cloud of nanotech drones, and then they've got all these awesome stats for it, so you can fight nanites, which is wonderful. Let's look at the Living Apocalypse. So this is essentially an elemental creature, but rather than being the element of fire or the element of water, it is the element of apocalypse. This is a creature that is created when there is a catastrophe so horrific, so cataclysmic, that it takes on autonomy and becomes, a creature that walks around and destroys things. And because this is Starfinder, this challenge rating 20 sentient apocalypse is also a source of equipment and gear, and you can kill this thing and take crystals from it, and then you've got these apocalypse crystals that do all these neat stuff. So there's the Migo, which we talked about before. There's another good example of what you can do with the dinosaur grafts. How do you take what looks like a Tyrannosaurus but is actually a very alien creature? Well, there's a good example of it. And of course, these little scythe claws that it has. What do you do with those? What if I want to stab somebody with those? There you go. You can stab somebody with one of those. Orcs, hooray. I love the Osharu. This is another, player race thing. These are snail people. And they are kind of slow and kind of peaceful and kind of afraid, but they've got some very interesting abilities. In particular, the one that intrigues me about them is that they treat religion and science as the same thing. And so they can use the skills of life science and mysticism essentially interchangeably, which isn't an overwhelming, overpowering ability by any means, but it says so much about their culture. I am excited to play an Osharu snail person at some point because I think that sounds awesome. Yay, let's talk about the Phentamites. The Phentamites are a cool species of alien creature. Again, available as a player race. You got your racial traits right up there. They come from a planet that was destroyed by some kind of weird gravity event. And so what used to be their planet is now some kind of little singularity that is dense enough and strong enough gravitic field that it can hold several land masses that are just kind of floating around. So instead of a planet, it's like 12 or so just islands that are orbiting this thing and enough of an atmosphere that they can breathe. And you can see from the pictures, both this one and this one, they all are carrying climbing gear. That's because when two of these land masses pass closely enough, they have this whole group of people called bridgers that throw out lines and grappling hooks and build temporary rope bridges. So these two land masses can communicate with each other, they can trade, they can have a war, whatever it is they want to do, and then they'll just keep drifting and they'll pass each other by and those rope bridges will be destroyed. And you gotta hope, if you're the first one jumping from one to the other, that you don't miss and just fall down into the nothingness of space underneath you. Really interesting concept, really cool setting idea, and, two different creature stat blocks and racial traits for it. Planar Scions is kind of fun. They added the Aasimar and the Tieflings, half angels and half devils, to the game, which is a fun thing to have in a science fiction game. There is Predator. This is similar to what they did with the dinosaurs, where if you just need like a little rat or a dog or a bear or whatever, but you just need something that can eat you. Here you've got all the little building blocks from small all the way up to gargantuan, and then you can add some template grafts onto that and create any monster that you want. So hooray for that. Now let's skip ahead so that I can show you the ship mind. The ship mind is really fun because it is an ooze that can possess and or inhabit a ship and pilot it. And there is actually a group that uses these things to pilot their ships for them, and they become very responsive and they become much more effective in combat. So in their natural form, quote unquote, there's this ooze that lives in this giant tank, but then it can go out and it can possess a ship and kind of take it over. And so you've got the stats here of if you want to just fight this as an ooze hand to hand with your laser gun, or it can become a tier 13 spaceship, and you can suddenly, in space combat, starship combat, you can fight this thing out there as well. So there's so much in here, and I don't want to go too far. I do want to talk about the squawks because the Squawks is, I mean, as you can see from this tiny little 1/3 challenge rating thing, it's not going to be, you know, keeping anybody up at night because of how dangerous it is. But it is a companion. You can have him as a pet. And so it has a gear thing. There's actually a feat that lets you just have a Squawks as a pet. So you can see how much variety there is in the book. Like just even those two that I just clicked past. Stellar Protozoa, which is, you know, a little protozoic organism that flies through outer space and is big enough to threaten spaceships. You've got a swarm, a hive mind that includes just these kind of little humanoid warriors and then an actual ship that is part of the same hive mind. And that is how they, you know, it's a living starship that transports these other creatures around. And part of their life cycle involves these two different stages. There's just so many great ideas and so many options thrown in here of equipment, of stuff, of player options, of monsters you can fight. It has everything, and I really, really love it. So, last of all, let's talk about the appendices. This is essentially the exact same appendix that shows up in Alien Archive 1. And so, if you've already looked at that or watched my other video, then this is just repetitive information. But I do like the fact that they have the same appendix in both books, because then you don't have to flip back and forth between them, and you don't have to buy the first one if you only want the second one, because you've got all the same appendix information. That said, you should definitely buy them both because they're both amazing. But what this has is all of those subtype grafts and environmental grafts and template grafts that you can add on to a creature. And so let's look here at the subtype grafts. You want to have a Dinosaur, who is also a demon, who is also, let's give it an environmental graft. It's a demon who lives in the Arctic. And then you can put all that together, and now you've got, you know, an Arctic demon version of a dinosaur. And it's very easy. It's a really slick system of modular monster creation. So that's all through here at the end. This appendix has all of this information, and it's really great. So, Alien Archive 2 from Starfinder. Just another out-of-the-park hit for the Starfinder Alien Archives. These are absolutely phenomenal monster manuals. And in my opinion, the best in the business right now. So, big ups to them. Good job. And thank you for watching this show. I am Dan Wells, and you are awesome.